please give a warm welcome to the composer Volker Bertelmann, producer Tessa and director Edward Berger.
Thank you very much.
Well, welcome all of you. Edward, you know what a big fan I am of your work. I
don't say it.
No. Well, I will say it out loud. I'm a huge fan of what you do. It's astonishing for me to watch the themes of the movie and the journey of the main character in the production design. So, we watch this battle between darkness and light in the visual design. We watch this ornate design in contrast with sharp edges in every frame. Can you tell us about, telling the story of the film in the production design?
Yeah, a lot of the production design, I guess, okay, it comes from, first of all, a big inspiration for the movie is Pakula, the political thrillers from the 70s.
Alan Pakula, yeah.
Yeah, the precision, like Parallax View and President's Men and so forth. The precision of that director is incredible to me. Like when I watch it now, it's really a director who directs the gaze. Not only the actors, but he directs the gaze of the audience. When I watch this movie, you'd have Warren Beatty for 2 minutes, producer on the movie, in darkness from behind, and then at the right line he cuts around and we can see his face, and suddenly I look at it. So, and Pakula is very great with architecture. There's usually very graphic lines through the frame, and he directs my gaze sort of to the important part in of the image. And the same is I tried to do a little bit of that because I knew we had the Sistine Chapel, and so in opposition to that, I wanted to build the Casa Santa Marta almost like a jail. The Sistine Chapel, old ecclesiastical building, so the Casa Santa Marta had to be a modern, kind of darker. The shutters go down, they're all locked in. It has to feel claustrophobic, so that by the end, and the walls have ears, and Rafe is all by himself, and we can hear his breath and all the humming of the neon lights, and so that by the end, when the shutters open, the light comes in, and suddenly we feel a sense of relief. And to sort of say it with the great Leonard Cohen, there's a crack in everything, and that's where the light comes in, and that's sort of the hope of the movie.
It is striking that his quarters are all dark, and you guys just saw the last shot. He finally opens, but he has a view of women coming out, and throughout the movie, there is this very subliminal contrast between femininity and masculinity. It's in the design and everything you've done in this film. Can you tell us about that?
Absolutely. On the surface, of course, it's Isabella who personifies that, the constant gaze of the female who's relegated to the 30th row in the back. Even someone like Isabella, just imagine, can't open her mouth in the Catholic Church. She's there to cook and to make sure that the men can vote properly until she finally opens her mouth. And I don't know how you reacted to that. Sometimes people get very relieved when she finally speaks her mind because she says what we think. She speaks our heart. And then obviously we have it in the story of Carlos, like this mysterious presence that arrives in the beginning, and his feminine side. And also I would say in Rafe, I think, I was speaking to Stanley the other day, and I never thought of it that way, but he suddenly said, doubt is not a very masculine, not considered to be a masculine sort of trait. Yeah, it's more like, it's always associated with femininity because it invites debate, it invites question, it invites discussion, And men very often get associated with strong decisions and fast decisions, and that's where we go, and everyone has to stomp after them, no matter if the direction is right or not, but everyone just goes. And that is sort of also like a feminine element of the movie, I would say.
Volker, welcome back. Huge fan. This is your 5th collaboration with Edward. I was struck with, I mentioned the crystal Bachet, the fact that you are able to tell us the inner life of the main character through music. Can you tell, from the very first scene, we hear the crystal Bachet that actually chimes into his inner world. Can you tell us about composing a film in this fashion?
Well, first of all, maybe we have to explain what a crystal Bachet is, because it's actually when I was talking with Edward in the first time about the film, and I knew that it was happening in the Vatican. I had the feeling that, these wide halls and these big white ceilings, and I had the feeling that this maybe are rooms of idealistic religion, in a way, where you feel like whenever you go there, you feel the spirit that, just like a wind going through all the buildings, even though we know that underneath the idealistic idea there's a lot of failure and a lot of things that are not being reachable. But at the same time, I felt when I find something, a musical instrument that helps to transport that idea, that we are, when somebody has a religious thought, that you hear this instrument in his head as a shadow. That was, in a way, the leitmotif that is repeating over the whole film. Now I'm coming to the crystal Bachet. It's an instrument that's built in 1952, and it's a little bit like an avant-garde instrument from 2 brothers near Paris. They lived near Paris. And they built these kind of musical objects, in a way. And one of those is the crystal Bachet, which is existing of glass rods, 4 octaves in tune, but you play it with water, so your fingers have to be wet, and you have to rub these rods, and then on the other side of the rods there are these metal cylinders that are amplifying the sound of the glass. And when you hear this sound the first time, it's a little bit like an analog instrument, like an organ, but it also sounds like a distorted synthesizer. It could be out of space, like it's otherworldly in a way when you hear it. And when I found that instrument, it's not, I know some other people who know that instrument like you. You were saying, I know that instrument from another time. You haven't heard that the first time, I think, in the film, I guess. So. But when I heard it the first time, I said, this is fantastic. So I recorded, I invited a crystal Bachet player from Paris coming to my studio, and we played a whole day. He set it up. It looks like a spaceship, this whole thing. And then, he played a lot of themes that I composed for it, and I sent the themes to Edward. And the good news is when you send ideas like that to a director, you're in a way, you're vulnerable, you send it out and you're like, hopefully the phone call will come,
I know that, and I stab into that wound, right?
Yeah, it is actually, it was the same with All Quiet when we did the music for that one. I also sent him an idea, and it's always a little bit of you open, I can't be, how can I say it? I always open my heart to an idea.
Yeah.
If I'm not doing that, then I'm not really passionate about it.
But 2 quick follow-up. I would have thought you could have used an organ, but instead you choose a modern sound. And then also, my original question was about the fact that you are composing for the inner life of the main character, which is remarkable.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm, in a way, when I'm seeing a film, it actually goes mostly when it's a very good, well-done film, which Edward's film was already, when I saw it the first time, it's so nice when it's done so well, because then a musician can so much more choose his role or her role. You know, you can find your space in between. If you have to cover things that are not working, that's always hard, because you have to somehow, you know, juggle, and you make maybe music for scenes that are where you normally would say, hey, this is a great dialogue, why should I put music on top of it, you know? And with Edward's films, that's very nice, because you hear the dialogue, and I was sometimes, it's like music for me when I hear a good conversation on the screen. I'm like, I don't need to put anything between it. And so, because the films are going so deep into my soul when I watch them, the only thing I can do is I can see what I can, you know, compose to help the inner thoughts of the protagonists, and just establish them here and there as thoughts that we can't see, or I can help the whole the story. I can support it with little hints or aftermath of a thought. So that's how I'm writing with these instruments.
And Tessa, I'm not ignoring you, but I do have a follow-up to both Albert and Volker. The way you guys use sound and music in your films is so different and unique, where it's minimalist, and you use it to punch it. The music comes in the most unexpected moments, but it is part of the storytelling and integral. You know, can you tell us about your collaboration and your usage of music? Edward?
No, you.
I was gonna, because Tessa drove us, to be honest. So Volker and I mean, that's pretty much what we do. We always say, like, let's push each other to try something new and something we haven't done before, and something unusual. And also like that, I mean, wonderful your analysis, because actually that's what we always go for, kind of a clash almost between image and sound, like a contrast. It's something that jolts you, and that if Ray feels something in his stomach, I want you to get a kick in your stomach too, you know, in a way. And then, so just as an anecdote to talk about also how Tessa comes into this story, is that I never really found any temp music. There was nothing really that worked, except for one cue from your friend Jonathan Glazer's Birth, that I used in the beginning. For the first 10, 15 minutes, it kept coming back. And for the rest, Volker composed, and we started filling those puzzle pieces. And then he composed something for the beginning, and that wasn't Birth, but it was inspired by it. You know? And then we showed the movie, really proud that we're all done, and thinking, okay, this is great, sounds great. I mean, inspired by Birth, can't be that bad. And Tessa didn't know this, that it was inspired by Birth, but she kept saying, somehow, you know, the movie, you're not quite telling the audience yet what kind of film they're invited for. And I had no clue what she was talking about. So it took me weeks to screen the movie again, and talking to Volker and talking to Nick, our editor, who's here, saying, like, what does she mean? Like, and then suddenly I woke up one day and said, Volker, you know what we didn't do? We didn't replace Birth in the beginning. It's still that. It's a different movie. It's a different tone. And Volker composed the whole beginning until the credits, that, you know, that inviting you. But also the other day I was at a screening, and this woman, and I was so happy, because this woman told me, you know what, I've had no idea what I was in for, and I watched you, we started the movie, from the first note on, I knew it was a thriller. And she kind of settled back, and I knew that was Tessa's doing, you know, like, because she kept pushing us.
Absolutely.
That we kind of suddenly knew, okay, that's the,
Yeah.
it was missing that link.
Tessa, I wish you had been here when the big reveal happens. in which we're videotaping this and we're going to post, so I don't want to spoil, but there's a big reveal at the end of the movie. You should have heard the audience reaction. There was giggling, there was gasps. Why do you think people react the way react to the...
Well, that's an impossible question because I don't know how this audience reacted, but...
They were shocked, and they were laughing and giggling.
I think people respond to race response, actually. I don't know whether that's true for all of you, but I think the story that Carlos Benitez tells Rafe, once Rafe is, oh, not again, and something so appalling that I don't know what to do with it, is what his face is saying. Mm-hmm. But what Carlos does is hold his hand and so kindly and so generously says, this is what I am, mm-hmm. and this is why I got here, and this is what I think God will allow.
Correct.
And I think there's both that, first of all, shock. No, oh my God, a twist I wasn't expecting. So the story itself making a turn of a wheel. And then there's this horrible surprise of our lead. And we go, yeah, we know what you're feeling, mate. And I think it is quite funny. And then I think it's so moving mm-hmm. that the story... So you kind of go through all of these emotions, or I do, and maybe you all did as well, that story is about being allowed to be himself. Mm-hmm. And that moment of change that Rafe needs to allow, that Lawrence has to allow, is actually so brilliant for the church, for the world.
You made this film happen. You got the novel, you got the writer, you got the film going. Did you understand when you read the story that it is so specific about this conclave, but that it plays out universally about politics? And especially, I mean, it's so timely, this film.
Well, I certainly didn't know, because I started such a long time ago, that we would be delivering this film into an election in this country. I certainly didn't know that. What I did know, I didn't know it would be good, because you never know until you're lucky enough to bring the artists on board that we did, that you would have something that was more than you might have hoped for, so much more than you might have hoped for. But I did know that that novel was about an intense world, and an enclosed world where men were fighting for power. I did know that, and I think that's always resonant. And I did know that something happened in it that shifted the status quo. So those two things I did know, and I felt that was a very good reason to try and make a film.
Mm-hmm. Edward, you actually show us in great detail the process of voting, and your camera lingers on the specific of the ritual. Can you tell us about why was that necessary in the storytelling for us to see the richness of detail?
Oh, it's such a mysterious and interesting world. I wanted to share it with you, and we don't, and all these, I mean, I think maybe it comes back to when I was 9. I was born Protestant, and I remember first going to a Catholic church when I was 9 with my best friend, and being so taken by surprise. Oh my God, they're kneeling. This is I was constantly panicking that I was doing something wrong, because there was so many procedures that I had no clue about. And I found it so interesting. I actually thought it was much more interesting than my church, because it was more dramatic and theatrical. And so I think maybe that first impression, I thought, like, this is interesting for outsiders to see, even for insiders, because all of us are outsiders. None of us have been in the conclave, I assume. There's no cardinals here, And the more I found out, I had a wonderful religion teacher next to us who took us by the hand and basically, told us many, many details. And some things he didn't know. And I realized, it's all about world building and creating this and filling the void with our imagination, because why not? It's a movie, we are allowed to. We're allowed to create, fill in the gaps that we don't know. But a lot of things like the voting and the papal chamber, how it's sealed, and the ring and so forth, that's all researched and true, and does happen this way.
I greatly admire your DP, Stefan. Can you tell us about how sharp the camera, the movements is, and how it zeroes in on every scene. In particular, the fact that the objectivity of us watching what is happening, how sharp it all is.
We were very much, and that's sort of a collaboration between editing, camera, and I, in a way, that we really, you know, I really like sharpness, I really like precision, I really like dissecting. So in a way, the humanity in this and sort of razor sharply analyzing. For me, it's a chess. For me and Stefan, it was a chess game. You know, Stanley in the beginning references the chessboard, and that's when I first read the script. I immediately thought this movie has to be really really well maneuvered, like a chess game, like a very well architectured chess game. So the movie had to be precise. And Stefan is something within that precision. I mean, he shot, you know, Un Prophète and Rust and Bones and Jackie, and so great cinematographer with great credits. And I always wanted to work with him, and because he has a great, you know what the wonderful thing is about Stefan? He doesn't want to shine. He's like Rafe. He's not the guy who goes like, I have to be in the limelight. He serves the story. He takes his camera actually back and says, you know what's up there is much more important. I just want to film it. He's incredibly intuitive, very sensitive, and beautifully, like always focused on the actor's emotion, and always like, and within that, you know, finding like we really explored where the camera has to go. You know, it's really important when Rafe, let's say, gets 5 close-ups in the voting scenes, because this is his eye line to Tedesco, this is his eye line to John, this is his eye line to Stanley, then he needs one here and one here when he feels oppressed, and one here. So there's a lot of, the camera has to go where Rafe looks, or where I can see his thought process. And that was very much something that I talked to a lot about with Stefan.
That's brilliant. Volker, this is the second film in a row I've seen with you and Edward that you set the tone for the entire movie. I mean, that industrial sound that you created for All Quiet on the Western Front, like, set the tone for the rest of the film. In this one, you do a similar magic trick. Is like you set the tone right. I'm curious about, were you reacting to the opening sequence once they had been edited and presented to you, or you actually led the way with the sound?
Well, as Edward said, we had that was maybe one of the longest procedure to get that right musically, you know, because I was already clear about using cellos and snapping sounds and, you know, very low bass drums. I mean, the bass drums that you hear that are just these soft, but they are very soft, but they're really low, like they do like, you know. And to get that is not like you smash on a low bass drum, you really hit it very soft, because then the low frequency is coming, you know, underneath the bass there's another bass, and that is something that we always talked about when we wanted to have these impulses. So I had the sounds, all the sounds ready, but I think the scene that was actually giving the whole film the shape was the one when the Pope is transported, you know, and you know, at the end we hear at this piece of music we hear the, you know, the ticking of the inside of the ambulance. We hear like the tick, tick, tick,
yeah.
tick, tick. That was the scene where I had the feeling, when we had that in shape, we could all replace a lot of other scenes later, because that had the most power. It had the rawness. It had all the bangs and, you know, the things, the snippets that hit you. It had, in a way, the range that then was informing all the other pieces of music later. And that was at the end of the process. So I wrote already all the rest, you know, that was coming later. And so sometimes that's how it is. You have to crack the nut, but it's not always working at the beginning. you're digging and digging and digging, and you try. And my feeling is always, the more I compose and the more things I put out, one day one thing will land. If I sit at home and I'm depressed that nothing is landing, I can go home and just say, I think this is not, I can't do this, so I rather work and work and work. And so when Edward calls me and he says, this is not working, I think that is a challenge, and I love that challenge. I'm keeping it as my inner growth, I would say. So, and then we cracked that, and I think from there on, everything fell in place, including that we had the feeling that the end piece is in the way the biggest piece. I mean, on the credits, not in the film. So I recorded the longest in the studio, the piece when the summer comes in, which you maybe carry home when you see the full credits. You just see you take the summer feeling with you, and you're like, yeah, maybe when I'm going home, I will either discuss with my friends about, religion, or about how you grew up, or what can we change, or, things like that in a thriller. I think that's amazing.
Tessa, Ralph Fiennes, tell us about bringing him on board. This is my second time watching the film, and he says so little words, but there's so much internal work that is happening. You tell us about bringing it. So not just Ralph, the whole cast is remarkable. It's an incredible ensemble.
Yeah. Well, that was Edward and I together. Really, Edward. When he first read the script, he started sending me photographs of men next to each other. And Ralph, I think, was always in those photographs. And putting the right faces together was the game that you played for quite a long time, I think. But Ralph was such a clear front runner for Edward for that part, partly because, age, intellect, the complexity of that part and how it all had to be thoughtful. So a very, very clever man was what he was playing, but also somebody who could show on his face what he was thinking and feeling without having to do very much. And he's so experienced, and I think Edward and he on set, along with Peter, the writer, were such an amazing trio together, actually, that they went through... I mean, they sort of understood each other without saying very much as well, didn't you? Just three bound together by the soul of that story being about losing one's faith, and was there a way through this plot of finding it again. And I think Ralph found great solace in Edward's unbelievable knowledge and craft and faith in him. So he felt incredibly supported by knowing that Edward knew what he was doing with every shot, and incredibly supported by Peter, who he would sit with and talk about the script with Edward and Peter as well. So,
but before you hired Edward, you had already gotten the script from Peter, which is, he is the gentleman responsible for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy script with Gary Oldman. What was it about working with Peter that was essential for you? It's a remarkable script.
It is I completely agree with you. He's a remarkable writer and a remarkable man. I'd worked with Peter when I'd run a company called Film 4, so I'd developed films with Peter and I'd made a film with Peter. But actually, when I read the book, it was so clear that the best person in the world to adapt this book was Peter, because of the film you mentioned, actually, Tinker Tailor, and also his adaptations of Wolf Hall, which you may have seen, which he's just come out with the second one. He has amazing clarity and he's very spare, but he's also incredibly soulful. He's a man who you can see when you meet him. He's gentle and thoughtful and complex, and his writing is so precise that if he changes one tiny thing, the screenplay changes. It's like microsurgery. He just knows every detail so carefully. So he and Edward spent time together once I'd sent Edward, the screenplay. They then spent quite a lot of time refining and refining, and they were small changes that made big differences, weren't they? So I was just very lucky. It doesn't often happen that the person you know is the right person says yes, but his clarity that he knew what to do with the novel, his own history as an altar boy, an ex-Catholic altar boy, meant that he felt very comfortable adapting it.
Edward, I wanted to ask you about the contrast between the Casa Maria and the Sistine Chapel. When we get to the Sistine Chapel, there's a slight sense of freedom when we get there, and openness when we're in Santa Maria Casa. Things are more restricted, closed framed. I'd love to pick your brain about that dynamic.
So that for me was all about contrast. There's a lot of, what I love about this world is the clash of modernity with the archaic, the iPhones, the vaping, the iPads, the plastic body bag that the Pope ends up in, because you kind of, you're in Rome and you realize used to get up in the morning and have an espresso and look out the window and you see there's two priests having a coffee on the corner. There's a nun smoking. There's a archbishop with a briefcase in his hand, and you realize they're all just people going to work. They're like you and I. We always put them on a pedestal, and we think there's some kind of holiness in it. They've dedicated their life to one cause, like many of us as well, and this cause is maybe slightly different from us, but they're still human beings, and we wanted to put that humanity into the movie, and that humanity also means, these modern things like vapes and sins and mistakes, cigarettes and all this stuff. And they're secret, all of them reveal secrets. And that, in a way, that clash is also, symbolized with Casa Santa Marta, which is just, more modern. It's really it's almost and by the way, the real Casa Santa Marta is super ugly, so I didn't want to build it like that. So I couldn't use our money to build an ugly building, so we wanted to design something. So we took a lot of creative license with that. So you have this ecclesiastical building, and then the other building that has that breathing space, that spirituality to it, and the other building just needed to be like a jail, basically. It needed us to feel like locked in. Yeah. The movie's called Conclave, so we got to lock the people in, and people are locked into a jail. So that's what it feels like. And then also, as I said, to feel that relief in the end. When that quickly,
because I'm being told that we need to wrap up. But your costume designer, amazing. Tell us why the cardinal robes are richer reds that we've seen before, and also what a remarkable job that I was able to distinguish between all of them. They're wearing the same outfit, but each of them has, your costume designer added a little peculiarity to each character that subliminally I was able to tell, that's it's amazing work.
That's the real art of it. I mean, Lizzie Crystal is a person I've made 4 movies with. She's almost as long as Volker. She's like one of the closest collaborators. She's a dear friend. For example, the last shot of the nuns in white is her showing me a picture of these 3 nuns in white, saying like, well, shouldn't this be in the movie somewhere? And I said, yes, this is the final shot. That's it. It's the femininity. It's the future. It's young women in white laughing. So the red is the real cardinals. Just to tell you a little bit of the license we took. The real cardinals, in truth, they wear a little bit of an orangey fabric. Right. Yeah. That is not. Also, I don't think it's the prettiest, and it looks a bit cheaper than it used to. The 50s and 60s, it looked much nicer. In the Renaissance, it looked much nicer. They had nicer, rich fabric, a deep red, and we just got inspired by that. And Lizzie also did the costumes for All Quiet, and I remember she came to me with, and the same on Conclave, she comes to me with a book that she opens up, and that's exactly what fascinates her. how do I tell a character even though they're wearing uniforms? And these are uniforms. And so she gives Tedesco, the wonderful Italian cardinal, a big red cloak and red gloves. And he had like very expensive shoes, tailor-made, with a little GT stitched on top of it. I never saw him in the movie, but it gave him confidence, and he walked differently. He loved those shoes, you know, and all these little details that is Lizzie sort of give, and the crosses. Everyone has different crosses. They're all designed and like in real life, cardinals tailor their clothes. They all go to one shop, but they still tailor their clothes, and they bring their idiosyncrasies into these clothes.
I have one last question, but we have a special guest here who I'm going to put him on the spot, is the editor, Nick Emerson. Nick, come over here. And I was blown away by the fact that the voting, we have 6 times that we watched the voting, and each time is completely different. It's mind-boggling. Tell us about editing those 6 voting sequences.
Well, I mean, they were terrific fun to cut, and Edward is a very prepared director, so he had storyboarded many of those, in fact, all of those sequences. But we sort of let the first one play out almost in real time and in a certain way that you got to see it fully, and then that gave us permission, I guess, to really sort of change them for the subsequent votes, depending on what dramatic situation was happening at any given time. But Edward had very carefully planned which shots and the shape of those, and yeah, they were brilliant.
I kind of like this. Then last question, I said it was only going to be one question, but the opening sequence is extraordinary, the editing. There's not a single shot that is wasted in that opening sequence. Tell us about arriving to the final cut.
I'm just trying to remember, but it's like all these things in editing. It takes a while to. I mean, Edward had a very clear idea of how we wanted to do it, but I think what I remember is I did a pass, and then we just continued to work on it. And it's just, Edward is very precise, as he says, and like we just wanted to go through it and not have a wasted frame, and then make it non-linear as well in a way, so that you see everything you need to see, but it may not necessarily be in the precise order that it's happening, and that's what.
So translation, that Edward is the very difficult person to work with.
No, he's no, he's brilliant, and he's so into the detail, and I love that because it's really, you get to sort of focus on the macro and the very detailed craft of putting 2 shots together, and that's what makes that sequence so sort of energized, is the disruptive nature of it, I think, and it sort of reflects the anxiety in Rafe's head, I think, because he's just, this man he had admired has just died, and he knows, even though the audience doesn't know it at that point, but you just get the sense that he's going to have to deal with something, so.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you, everybody.